Welcome back to another episode of the Canon on the Boomer Bus channel. I'm your host Terry, and today it is DCU Day, January 31st. All right, so we finally got the updates from James Gunn that were promised. He said, at first they said hopefully early in the new year. Then he said January, and people start to get antsy, myself included. And just like we started to think, the 31st, right before February. So they did it in a very interesting way, and I'd be curious as to how this worked. But essentially, they had a meeting on the Warner Brothers lot, and they invited all the major outlets, and they did a presentation, and they gave everybody the night to write their articles and everything, and then they gave them embargo pretty much. And so at a certain time today, everybody was able to release their articles. And then on top of that, DC released a video with James Gunn announcing everything and really doing something interesting, because even when Kevin Feige has these announcements, they give you like the very basic gist. Even if they give you a casting or a director, they just give you the gist. They don't really go into it. I really feel like James Gunn was very transparent, not only in how this is going to work, but also in the different ways that they're influenced to write the story. So anyway, the main thing before we get into the slate of 10 projects, number one, they're going to be doing DC Elseworlds, or at least labeling that. Now, there's going to be some of this during this video, so if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I said this like 7 years ago, um, before I even had YouTube, back on Blog Talk Radio, still got the audio. I said that they have to start doing Elseworlds next to cinematic universes because you closing yourself in. Not too long after that, we got the Joker. Now, Joker was clearly Elseworld, but everybody was still like, what is this? And they just didn't have a label. And not too long ago, I started, actually maybe a month, 2-3 months before Doctor Strange Multiverse, I was like, they need to just start labeling this stuff. So at first I wasn't really worried about the label. I was worried about the stories. Now, then I said, hey, you got to label this stuff. I said, just like What If starts off with the Watcher, like, hey, there's many stories. Let's dive into this particular universe. Something like that. And then Multiverse of Madness end up using, they didn't label it, but they used like Earth, whatever. And I was like, that's what they need to do right at the beginning, a title card. Like, why not? You can do that. And they do that sometimes with the animated stuff. So just do that. That's what they've done. They labeled it DC Elseworlds, and that is going to live outside of the main storyline. So the Joker sequel, the Batman sequel, whatever else they end up doing. And hopefully now, so far, we've kind of got original stuff, which is fine, but I want to see some of that cool stuff. I want to see Superman Red Sun. They've done these in the DC animated, but I want to see them do live action Elseworlds. But anyway, so that's separate. This is chapter 1, and chapter 1 is Gods and Monsters. I told you when The Rock came out and said that he would have a possibility of returning when they get to their multiverse chapter, I was like, no one has said that word. So they must have shown him something. We're going to have chapters instead of phases. Boom, today, chapter 1. So Gods and Monsters and all that, interesting. So anyway, that's kind of where we are. James Gunn said that the story's always going to come first. Everything's going to be connected. He said all this before. And again, this is part 1 of chapter 1. 10 projects are going to be over a 4 to 5 year span. He said that before. So that's right around the contract length. So if this starts to go well, obviously they'll bring back Gunn and Safran and keep going. But this is part 1 of chapter 1. So Number one, we got Creature Commandos. Never heard of it. Not going to act like I know about it. But even according to James Gunn and the discussion they had, this version is going to be different than the comic version, which saw kind of like classic monsters like Bride of Frankenstein and type stuff. So we don't know what type of creatures we're going to get. I'm sure that allows James Gunn to be free with what he does, but it's going to be a animated series, and the animated series is being written by James Gunn, and it's already in production. And again, the voice actors that they cast will play live action versions. And a lot of people are focusing on this project, but he said before everything's going to be connected. So I think that means the live action people will be in animated stuff as well with their voice, and they'll be in the video games. So this kind of kicks it off. We have no idea what it sets up. If they keep it in the Nazi era, which is what this originally was, then it might be, because we got a lot of prequel stuff, it might be setting up something that's been brewing for years. Either way, I was already worried. I was like, this the James Gunn stuff I'm talking about. Not to say that this can't be good, but I'm like, this is not not in the first chapter. B, not the first thing you kick everything off with. That I just, yeah. But anyway, so I'm gonna give it a chance. Obviously, we're gonna see what it is. Yeah, we'll go from there. So then after that, we got Waller, live action HBO Max series, which is a spinoff of Peacemaker. He says the Peacemaker or Team Peacemaker, they're going to team up with Viola Davis, and they got a story that we don't really know. But it picks up where the first season leaves off, where Viola Davis kind of got outed to the world, and we'll go from there. This is being written by the writers of Watchmen and Doom Patrol. So they Gunn said that he thinks the story is incredible. So already right here we have a little bit of, might as well talk about it now. This is not a complete reboot. And I'll tell you kind of my feelings on it once we get towards the end. But this is not a complete reboot. I see a lot of people doing mental gymnastics. It's plain as day. Viola Davis is coming back. That already tells you what you need to know. But then you have the entire Peacemaker team. That tells you what we need to know. Now, some people will say it's James Gunn's TV show. Of course it comes back. We're not really talking about his preference. We're talking about the logic and the rules. We will see opportunities for other people to come back, and we'll get to that. So then from Waller, we go into Superman Legacy, and this is already has a date, July 11, 2025. This will be in their words, the true kickoff for the DCU. So that other stuff is setting things up, but this is where it really starts. Of course they're gonna say that because it's Superman. Now, if it really kicked it off, it would have been first. But anyway, they did say some stuff about it, but we don't know a whole lot. I know that some people were talking about the title and connecting it to the picture of Superman, All-Star Superman, and everything, and I don't think we're going to go there. But they talk about Superman balancing Kryptonian heritage with human upbringing. And to me, that's very much like Man of Steel. But then they go on to say that basically we're getting that blue Boy Scout OG golly Superman. He's the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. And he is kindness in a world that thinks that kindness is old fashioned. Now, my thing is, I get it if you're going to have Superman be all happy go lucky. Not my choice, but I get you make that decision. But when you then add that to the world pretty much being cynical, I don't see how we're far from Man of Steel. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be bad, but I'm going to be curious how they pull it off, because if you have the world realistically react to Superman like it did in Man of Steel and BVS, then I feel like the realistic reaction to that reaction is how Henry Cavill was and how Zack Snyder wrote it and Christopher Nolan wrote it. It would be that type of conflict. So, how do we have a character who is in conflict with how the world receives him, but also is just for whatever the pure optimist or whatever? Now, I don't know if that's how it's going to come off. I'm just reading the words, and I don't know how that's going to play together. And again, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'll be curious as to what they do with that. And they said before he'll be on the younger side, early in his career. So that's pretty much all we know about that. Then we have Lanterns, HBO series. Very interesting. So in a nutshell, this is going to follow Hal Jordan and Jonathan Stewart. First of all, very happy they went with the OGs, because I get it. A lot of people are saying that this pleases both crowds, and it does, but I'm a fan of both. I to me, Hal Jordan is a necessity. If they want to wait on Jon Stewart, that's fine, because I'm very into the idea of the ring passing on to the next person. So when you have iterations where they're both there, I'm not a fan of it necessarily, but I like both characters. So Hal Jordan was a must. The fact that they added in Jon Stewart, we'll kind of see how that plays. But they're calling it a true detective type show. They're space cops investigating a mystery, and then they find something that they find stumble onto this mystery or whatever that plays a big role into the rest of the main storyline. Now, I'm not saying this is the case, but I cannot help but notice this is almost exactly what I pitched on my on Blog Talk Radio back in the day, and on my YouTube channel on the Canon. Actually, this is what I pitched when I talked about a DCU reboot, and literally what I called it, because I refuse to call it the DCU. That's stupid. So I pitched the DCU reboot because I called for a reboot a long time ago. And my pitch for Green Lantern was just Hal Jordan. It was an origin story. But the way I framed it was that he got paired up with Kilowog after training and had to basically like ride along and kind of be an apprentice. But while they're out, Hal's a little bit of a go-getter. Some stuff happens, one thing leads to another, and he's trying to chase down this mystery and solve this case. And so what it ends up being in my story is he's trying to find out what happened to this planet and a couple other planets that are linked. And eventually he finds out that it's Brainiac. And Green Lantern, or Hal Jordan, then goes back to Earth, and by the time he's been gone for years, he finds Batman and Superman are working together, and he kind of warns them about Brainiac. So that's what it was in my story. Sounds extremely familiar, except they replaced Kilowog with Jon Stewart. But at the same time, it's very possible that's not where they're going with this story. But the premise is similar. But again, not something that I would say they took. Extremely excited, obviously, because it's the exact same pitch that I had. All right, The Authority, never heard of. Again, we got some James Gunn going on, as he called this a passion project. Not to say no one knows about this, but definitely a deep cut. James Gunn likes the weird deep cut stuff. Now, for this, people are talking because they pitch it as a group of superheroes who are a little hardcore about how they want to fix the world. And automatically people are thinking anti-hero, Just League Dark, all that stuff. And I get that. But then a lot of people are kind of connecting this to being the villains, like the main villains, and going up against Superman. And I think they will, but I don't think they're here on this Earth Prime or whatever they're going to call it. Because I don't think you have a Superman and these guys are running around. Now, it might be scaled down. I'm just going off what people talk about in the comics. In the comics, they talk about how wide scope they are and how they enforce things on the Earth. Now, if they were doing that, obviously they would have been fighting Superman. Like that would have happened in his movie. And they're not going to come down to Earth and start doing stuff without seeing Superman. So I tend to believe what's going to happen is they're in a different universe and they're going to end up coming to Earth Prime or the main Earth and try to pull that same crap. Now, I think this movie like the whole movie takes place in a different universe, but somehow they're going to end up in our universe eventually, and that's when they'll clash with Superman and the others. But yeah, like I said, never heard of it. Got the basic gist of it. Sounds like a number of different things we've seen in the DCU and the MCU, or in DC and MC and Marvel comics. My bad. And so it'll be interesting. I know he says it's a passion project, and I'm just hoping James Gunn's don't go too weird. Anyway, so we got Paradise Lost. And this is another HBO Max series, live action, that they call kind of a Game of Thrones style. It's all about political intrigue and drama and scheming for power. And this takes place before Wonder Woman is born. So that sets up a world where they can really dive into the material and not have to focus on the character. And it'll be interesting. I mean, you see these references to HBO shows, and for good reason. HBO has some of the best shows, TV series out there. So playing into some of that richness and that storytelling, much like the way Andor did for Star Wars, where they went into something different. I'm excited for this. First of all, I love political drama. I love Greek mythology, and so I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but this all kind of falls in line with that. And I think it'll be interesting. Now, what it sets up, I don't know. Does it set up a lot? I don't know, but I think there's a reason they chose to do this. So it'll be interesting whenever we see movies that are prequels, how they end up playing into the larger thing. But it seems to me, whatever the big threat is, it's been around for a long time. All right, so then after that, we got The Brave and the Bold. I thought it was called Batman the Brave and the Bold, but whatever. So, anyways, about Batman. Now, Batman is finding out about Damian Wayne, his son, and ends up becoming Robin. So you got the Son of Batman, the animated movie, and then of course you got the Brave and the Bold comic run and all that. So there is a lot they can pull from, but they also mentioned the Bat family, I believe. So either way, I think you're talking about a older Batman. I think that's safe to say. Now, they could play it where he finds out he has a son young in the game. Now, his son is old though, because they mentioned he didn't know about him in the first 8 to 10 years. So either he got him right when he found out about him, or he got him later after he found out about him. Either way, that would have mean he met Talia al Ghul a long time ago, and that means that he had a kid. Or I mean, I guess you could write it where he met Talia al Ghul as Bruce Wayne before he was Batman. But I don't know if they're gonna go that way. I think, and then you talk about the Bat family. So if that's the classic Bat family or any part, he has to have been Batman for a while. And so I think we're going to get a much older Batman, which is interesting because, you know, you had a lot of complaints about Ben Affleck, Batman being introduced 20 years in, which I thought was amazing. And the only thing I can think is you got Matt Reeves, the Batman, with Robert Pattinson, and he was in year 2 or 2.5. And so maybe they're like, we can't go young and have 2 young Batman, so we got to go the opposite way, which means you end up right where the previous DC movies were. So that's interesting. I mean, I don't dislike Damian Wayne in that storyline, but that's not really where I would have wanted to see them go to start off with. But we're going to have that, and obviously who they get to be Batman is going to be the interesting story. So from there we got Booster Gold. Now I'm telling you right now, this is about to be Peacemaker 2.0, a live action HBO Max series. Um, James Gunn talks about the first superhero that they look into with imposter syndrome, and so Booster Gold comes from the future, and where he's kind of a loser, he comes back here to kind of be a superhero using future technology. And so it is Peacemaker 2.0. I almost guarantee it. I mean, the to put this as a standalone and focus on it the way they're talking about, it has James Gunn written all over it. You're talking about Peacemaker, who is not that super or whatever. They did a lot of comedy to make up for that, but then on top of that, they dove into his mental psychosis, and they're going to do the same thing here. Um, and then we got Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which I'm not familiar with, but I've been hearing a lot of people sing the praises of this comic book run. And essentially, James Gunn said we're going to see a very different Supergirl than people think about. And this comic arc was a very different Supergirl than people thought about. So this essentially is a story about her growing up. I forgot what the name of it was, but it's a piece of Krypton that kind of goes off some survivors there. But they say that the first 14 years of her life, she's been watching people around her die and killed in terrible ways. Now, I don't know what that means. I'm assuming they float off and then they got, predators that come attack their little habitat or whatever. But I heard that she comes across some girl and the girl wants revenge or something, but um, Supergirl kind of steps in to keep this girl innocent and do the dirty work herself because Supergirl's been doing dirty work. I don't know, but sounds interesting. So when she comes to Earth, I am curious how that's going to play out because it sounds very Brightburn, sounds very General Zod, sounds very Homelander. So what exactly is that relationship going to be like? Then they wrap it up with Swamp Thing, which they said would be a horror film and kind of his origins. I'm not a huge Swamp Thing, partaker. I obviously know of him and whatnot, and it's funny because people always do this, like, well, people don't realize Swamp Thing could be the most powerful universe or powerful character in the universe, and I'm like, they say that about a lot of people. And yes, if you write it a certain way, it could be, but either way, I'm not a horror film person either, so I don't know. I'm obviously gonna watch it, but I couldn't say that I'm super excited about it. So again, at the beginning, we learned that you're gonna have what's first. I believe no, not the Flash, Shazam. Now that Shazam Fear to God, he said leads directly into the Flash. Curious how, but that's what he said. He said the Flash resets the universe. Then he said Blue Beetle, and when he said this, he said is a good or whatever he used, whatever adjective, but like a nice piece of the DCU. He didn't say separate or he said it's in the DCU. Obviously, we haven't seen Blue Beetle, so it'd be easy to fold them in, but a lot of people thought it'd be a whole complete reboot. Not the case. So Blue Beetle will come into the fold. And then they said, then they go to Aquaman 2, which leads directly to the new projects, which is Commando Creatures or whatever. Now, how does Aquaman 2 lead to that? Obviously, it's a while away, so they could add stuff, but that's interesting. So here's the thing. I said it's not a complete reboot. Clearly, we got Viola Davis, Peacemaker crew. We got Blue Beetle coming into the fold. Even though we haven't seen him, this is somebody that is part of the old plans, but they worked them in. Didn't really make it clear that Shazam would be crossing over, but either way, it's not a complete reboot. Now, since we now know that, and James Gunn said there's no reason why the leads of all those movies can't continue on into the DCU. That makes me feel like Jason Momoa might actually be Aquaman still. I'm about at a 60%. Obviously the whole Lobo thing, that was the big thing, but nothing to say he wasn't excited that he gets to continue to be Aquaman. Nothing's to say that, hey, they said Aquaman is going to be one of the most powerful guys in this universe. Or they said, hey, we got a multiverse going, you can do both. Those are all possibilities. So I don't think it's 100%, oh, he's Lobo moving on. Because to me, if you were going to do that, it would be way easier to push the flashback, do your Aquaman movie, and then reset everything and it's a clean cut. The fact that they wanted to keep it where it is and connect it to the next project means to me that there's a reason they're doing that. And so that's kind of my takeaway with that. And I don't, again, this goes back to what I said when James Gunn first got hired, or actually it might have been before that, but when we're talking about the reboot, I said there's a couple ways they can go about it. I said the easiest way, we all said, is a fresh reboot. And you got the perfect reset button with the Flash movie. I said, however, if they want to go for more degree of difficulty, there's a way to set this whole thing up where you can bring people back or choose who you want. And that's what they essentially did. They're not hitting the reset button with Flash and just moving on. They're hitting the reset button with Flash, but then they're carrying over certain parts, including doing a Blue Beetle and all that. So to me, again, this says The Rock is coming back. They showed him the roadmap, and he knows there's a multiverse chapter, and they can patch things up by then, because chapter 1 seems like it's going to be between 4 to 8 years, or 4 to 7 maybe. And then we go to chapter 2. Multiverse might not be until chapter 3. So they got time, and Rock can come back, but won't be soon. This tells me that they don't know where Wonder Woman is, because they kick it off with a prequel that doesn't have Wonder Woman. And they said there's some things they haven't figured out yet. Now, obviously, the movie, I think, is figured out. That's not the movie they want to make. But could they still have Gal Gadot? They could. Or Gadot. So I think that's still up in the air. And yeah, I mean, I don't think Affleck's coming back to be Batman, although this older Batman could be. But I think they already said he's going to direct something, so they're going to find that. But the other part people might be missing is that you got to read some of the articles. They tell you more info. I think it was Hollywood Reporter is the one I read, and James Gunn and Peter Safran addressed it. They said that for what they are doing, that this for a lot of reasons, Henry Cavill doesn't work. And they said what I said before. They didn't fire him because they never casted him. And so whatever people want to say is semantics, but it's the truth. So the point being that what they're trying to do with Superman, Henry doesn't fit it. And people don't want to hear that. Oh, he looks like this and he does this and he's a good actor. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but it's more to it than that. They said for what they're trying to do, Henry does not fit. And that's that. They like him. They want to do other things, but they got a different image of Superman, and people just gotta accept that. So that again tells you they're going to pick and choose what they want to keep. And it seems like most of it they're getting rid of, but they're going to pick and choose. So, yeah, overall, man, I would have liked to seen the deep cuts wait a bit, maybe until chapter 2, but I don't think they're there just to be there. Everything's connected across mediums, video games, TV, all that. So they're going to play a part in the story. Now, is it possible they play a small little nugget or a end credit scene and it was just an excuse to make his weird movies? Probably. But I think there's enough good here and everything that I'm fine with it. And really the structure is more to highlight here. I mean, we knew we were going to get Superman. We knew we were going to get Batman and all that. But I think the highlight is how they're structuring things. And to be honest, a number of it is stuff that I've said before. And I'm happy to see that. But now we still got to see the execution. So, to me, I, I would say I'm right where I was at. Maybe I was right at a 50. I might be at a 51 because the Green Lantern stuff, some of that stuff excites me. The other stuff moves me back. So I'm right at a 51. I'm waiting to see how he executes it. So that's it for me. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Share it around. Get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe. And remember, if you heard it here, it's official canon.